Okay, Year 10, in today's lesson we are going to be looking at the characteristics of the tropical rainforests, and we're going to be focusing on the plants and the animals and how they have adapted to survive in the tropical rainforest, and we're going to also be looking at the soils within the tropical rainforest. So we're going to be able to understand the characteristics of the tropical rainforest soils, plants and animals, and describe the adaptation. So make sure please you're pausing the video as you're going through the activities to allow you an opportunity to write down the information and complete the tasks. So what we have here is the structure of the rainforest. So you can see that there are four main layers to the tropical rainforest. The shrub level, which is closest to the ground, sometimes also known as the forest floor. Now, this is important because it's so close to the ground and so compact and covered by lots of plants that it only receives 25% of sunlight. So the under canopy then is between 10 to 15 metres in height, and it receives 50% of the sunlight. So it's a little bit lighter than the shrub level, but still quite dark. The canopy layer then, we can see in this image, is here. So that's why we find find most of our plants, and that's dense layer. So the canopy layer is roughly receiving 75% of sunlight, and it's between 20 and 25 meters in height. And you can see in the canopy layer, it creates some sort of umbrella over the under canopy and the shrub layer. So that is why the shrub layer and the under canopy layer don't receive a lot of sunlight. And then we have the emergent layer. So the emergent layer is this top layer that we can see here. Not all plants and trees grow into the emergent layer, and the reason that they go into this layer is so that they can receive all the sunlight. So it's kind of an adaptation, an element that they have in order to survive. So please make sure that you have drawn a sketch of the structure of the tropical rainforest and written down the facts on the board before you move on. So what we have here are four statements, and these give us a little bit more information about the structure of the tropical rainforest. So I would like you to read through these statements and then put them next to the correct part of the layer. So you might choose to write them down in order or make summary points, but make sure please that they are in the correct order. So pause the video here and then I will give you the answers. Okay, so here we have the answers. So in the shrub layer, we already know it's very dark down there. Almost no plants grow, and that's because it's very wet and it's very dark. So we get a lot of things like moss, for example. And lots of plants that, like fungi, that survive in that dark, moist environment. In the under canopy, there is still little sunshine, so the plants have to grow larger leaves to reach the sunlight. So they might have to be reaching up into the canopy layer in order to get sunlight. And many, the plants in this area grow to roughly 12 feet. In the canopy layer is where most of the trees are, and we kind of already knew that anyway from the previous activity. The leaves are oval shaped, so they kind of look like this. And that means they're known as drip tips, which means that when the water falls onto the drip tip, they will be able to fall off the end, which means that the water won't collect on the leaves, and therefore they won't start to like sag and drop. Now, because there's many plants in this area, there is an abundance of animals that live there because that is where the food is most common. And then we have the emergent layer. So this is where the tallest trees tower up to 200 feet above the forest floor. And these trees are known as hardwood evergreen trees. So they are green and rich and vibrant and vast all year long. Not vast, sorry, dense, so that a lot of them, because the sunlight is 100% visible there. So what are the soils like in the tropical rainforest? What I would like you to do, first of all, is to pause the video and have a little go at drawing the two diagrams. So we have here the water cycle and then the nutrient cycle. So draw these two diagrams out for me, please, and label them. And I want you to think about why the soils are like this. So despite the large amounts of vegetation, the soils in the tropical rainforests are very infertile. And that is because the layer of the soil is very thin. So that's because there is a thin layer of soil. And that's where we get a lot of our decomposition happening. Now remember, we get a lot of things dying in this area because it's very dark and it's very wet. So we have a lot of nutrients entering the soil, but they don't always stay within the soil, and that's because of all of the rainfall. So due to the heavy rainfall, all of the nutrients which are entering the soil through decomposition are washed away, which means then the soil loses its fertility. So the soil loses the fertility, and then as a result they aren't very thin. So you'll notice later on in this lesson that when we're looking at the plants in this area, you'll see that the plants and the roots are found above the soil and not within the soil because the soil layer is so thin. So that is the reason why the soil is so thin and the complications that it faces because of the amount of rainfall in this area. So make sure you pause the video here before you move on. Okay, so what we're going to look at now are the adaptations. So this is a keyword that you will need to write down. An adaptation is an action taken by a plant and animal to adjust to the natural events in that location. So for example, because there's lots of rainfall, they need to be able to cope with such high levels of rainfall. Because there's high temperatures, they need to be able to cope with such high temperatures. The dark forest floor means that they need to be able to survive in those wet and dark conditions. And also there's infertile soils. So because the minerals are being washed away, we get a lot of leaching happening. So that can lead to lots of complications that these animals and plants need to be able to adapt to. So the three examples we're going to look at is the toucan, the poisoned dart frog, and the three-toed sloth. So I would like you please to either get some images of those three animals or just write down toucan, poisoned dart frog, and three-toed sloth, and then use these statements to decide which adaptations they have got in order to survive in the tropical rainforest. And then you will notice on the next slide I will go through the answers. So pause it here. Make some sort of spider diagram or write in sentences and bullet points or make a table to look at the adaptations that these three animals have had. Okay, so we can see that the toucan is our blue colour, and the toucan has bright feathers that attracts to a mate. They also allow them to deter predators. Their strong claw allows them to grip onto branches easily, so they can eat away at the fruits that are in the leaves. And their strong bill allows them to crack the nuts. So their adaptations allow them to do lots of things. The poisoned dart frog then is our green colour. Now their suction pads on the toes help them to cling onto the branches when they're climbing. So that allows them to reach up into the emergent and canopy layer in order to get more vegetation and food. Now, you can see they're quite brightly coloured, and that's because we want to scare off the predators, and because they spit poison in their defence. So if a predator came near them and tried to eat them, they would die because the poison would kill them. Then we have the three-toed sloth. So the three-toed sloth, you can see, kind of camouflages into that trunk. So that is an adaptation they've had to deter it from the predators. In addition to that, they have very strong claws and legs so that they can hang from the branches for a very long time to eat their food. And their slow metabolism means that they only have to go down to the forest floor once a week in order to go to the toilet. So these are the adaptations that the animals have had. So pause it here, make sure you've green penned your work, and then let's move on to look at the plant adaptations. So we can see here the plant adaptations. We have drip tips, buttress roots, and lianas. Now, lianas, think about Tarzan when he's swinging from tree to tree. That is a liana. A drip tip is what I mentioned before, those leaves that have the points on them to allow the water to drop off, so it drip tips off. And then the buttress roots, we can see, are those very thick roots that allow those evergreen trees that we find in the emergent layer to grow really high up into the tropical rainforest. So make sure, please, that you have a go at deciding which adaptations here are referring to which plants. And here we have the answers. So please make sure you green pen your work before you move on. And then that is the end of the lesson.